All right, thanks for bearing with us, guys. We wanted to make sure that we could successfully record the webinar for today if you wanted to review. So welcome to the Google for Education Administering Testing with Chromebooks webinar. My name is Cassie Caputo, and I'm here with James Leonard, and we'll be sharing some tips and best practices. Here's today's agenda. We'll go for a brief overview of the Google for Education ecosystem and a Chromebook overview. Next, we'll talk about setting up Chromebooks for assessment. And we have Arcadia Unified on the webinar today who's going to talk about their experience a little bit. And we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So thanks for joining. And for some best practices, when you joined, you should have been automatically muted. But just in case you're not, if you wouldn't mind double checking that all your phones and audio is muted as to not disrupt the audio on the webinar. Thank you. So to get started, here's a brief overview of what the Google for Education ecosystem looks like. And I especially wanted to point out this quote from our Google Global EDU evangelist, Jamie Cassup. And he talks about this quote often in some of his presentations that he gives, that the technology itself must be invisible during EdTech rollouts. It's our job as a tech company to get out of the way. And that's especially one of our top priorities when it comes to testing and assessment. So we wanted to make these devices very simple to turn on and off as testing devices as to not disrupt the classroom. And you'll see that as a theme across all products across Google EDU. So what is Google for Education all about? It's very important to us that we're enabling students to create with technology in this ever-changing environment that continuously includes new devices and new ways to connect. And in the classroom specifically, tools to transform teaching and learning. So we don't think that a teacher should need to have an IT background to be able to use technology in the classroom, but they should be empowered to transform their classroom with the technology that's available. And here's a little bit of background on the history of the Google for Education team. So at first, with Google Search, we were able to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And that phrase might sound a little bit familiar, and that's because it's our Google mission statement. So at this point, students had access to all the world's information right in their pockets, and their cell phones, on their devices. And that really started to shift what the classroom looked like. Now it was time to take that information and turn it into knowledge. Next, we take consumer tools and transform them into school versions of these. So that's where you see Google Apps for Education and Chromebooks as well. And the third phase, the phase that we're currently in right now, is designed for the classroom. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So Search really transformed the way that we're learning in classrooms. At first, it was almost like disrupting the way teachers teach in a really powerful way, because students suddenly had information at their fingertips that they didn't have before. And it was universally accessible with the number of devices that we currently have today, whether it's cell phones or laptops. And so teachers really had to start to change the way they thought about their classrooms and change the types of questions that they were asking. So students had all this information available right at their fingertips. So if any of you have used OK Google before, or the speech app on your Chrome browser, you've experienced this magic of Google in the classroom. So next we created school versions of consumer tools. So your apps like Docs, Drive, Hangouts, and all the tools that you would use to collaborate in your classroom as well. And then across the globe, we have 55 million students using Google Apps for Education, and among those, some of the top universities in the U.S. And schools are not alone in this. Over 5 million businesses are using Google Apps for Education. This is definitely a path that prepares students for their future roles in their communities. And we've also, as part of this, we've also included devices. So Chromebooks have become more prevalent in classrooms all across the U.S. Last year, Chromebooks were the #1 device in education and there are more and more options available each and every day. You can see that almost every OEM partner creates a Chromebook, and there's lots of different form factors, from touch to the Yoga to the Asus Transformer. And then finally, tools designed for the classroom. So Google Classroom has been one of our most successful education apps with over 10 million users across the U.S. and the globe. It's really mission control for all things Google Apps in the classroom. And there's been an evolution over time of the devices and the partnerships that we've had. So Chrome OS, for example, started out way back in 2010 as just a browser. It eventually became a platform for devices to make it simpler to manage and easy to use for students and school districts alike. And now in 2015, we have lots of different options from hardware and different form factors, everything from a Chromebox to touchscreen that your schools can use. And the tools and ecosystem as well has grown.
So some trends to watch, and this is James jumping on, some trends to watch going forward, 2015, 2016, and beyond. These are just some things to be aware of, in addition to the testing ecosystem, what to look for in Chrome OS going forward. As Cassie had mentioned, new form factors, especially when thinking about testing devices like Chrome Bits and the Chrome boxes, which are essentially full-fledged Chrome OS devices. The Chrome Bits the size of a candy bar, and the Chrome box the size of a small shoebox maybe. New form factors that bring the power of computing and make it more accessible. One of our interesting use cases that we're seeing come up more and more is actually signage, and use cases where using Chrome boxes and Chrome Bits and other digital signage solutions that are really built for school districts and enterprises in interesting ways. And in addition, we're seeing Chromebooks that hit a variety of different price points. Ultra-low-cost devices from $160 and up, all the way to more premium devices that a lot of districts are looking for as teacher devices. Overall, Chrome OS, and probably many of you on the webinar are pretty familiar with Chromebooks. If you've used Chromebooks, you understand a lot of what this slide says. Overall, they're simple, they're affordable, secure, and shareable. Back to what Jamie Cassett said in that initial quote, that in order to work in the classroom, they need to be invisible. And from a total cost of ownership standpoint, yes, the upfront cost, pretty reasonable. But overall, if you think about total cost of ownership, and really that comes into play dramatically during testing time in terms of man hours and manpower, TCO really matters. We recently worked with IDC to run some numbers on, can you quantify for us what the actual TCO is for Chromebooks? And we found out that it has a 91% lower TCO than any other device on the market. 93% faster to deploy for IT teams. Oftentimes, if you're rolling out hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices, you're not hiring 3 or 4 or 10 more IT people to support it. So we know there needs to be fast deploy. And overall, 50% less time for staff to manage and troubleshoot. All of these things have made Chromebooks the #1 device in K-12, and we are really excited about the future. But why we're here today, and there's my face. I know we don't have any video feed on this, but we're going to share with you a quick 2-minute video about what it means to actually use Chromebooks in an assessment setting. So I'll roll the video and then sort of break down the different settings before passing the ball over to Arcadia. Here we go.
I'm James from the Google for Education team, and in this short video, we'll cover how to set up Chromebooks to make state testing a breeze. Chromebooks are fast, secure devices that are perfect for the classroom. They boot up in 8 seconds and allow teachers to spend more time teaching and less time teching. But what happens when high-stakes testing season comes around? We know that testing season can be tough for technology teams. Rolling students into designated computer labs, shuffling around specific times, manually configuring devices, even the most organized technology teams tell us that it can be a struggle. Google offers a way to simplify this process and roll out testing to 10 or 10,000 devices using Chromebooks in single app kiosk mode. We worked hard with teachers and IT folks to get this right. Here's how to do it. In the admin console, click on Device Management and then Chrome Management. From here, we can control Chrome user settings and Chrome device settings for the domain. Now let's take a look at single app kiosk mode. It's a device setting, perfect for using apps such as Pearson TestNav for park assessments and Air Secure for smarter balance assessments. Additional assessment apps may be provided for state testing, such as ETS in Texas. All right, it's testing time. Let's configure our Chromebooks into a secure testing environment. In this case, I've set up an assessment organizational unit, sometimes called an OU, to group these devices together. Then, under Kiosk Apps, click Manage Kiosk Applications. Here I can either select an app published to the Chrome Web Store or add a Chrome app with a specific URL. In this case, I'll search the web store for TestNav, add it, and save the changes. I'll also select Auto Launch, so the Chromebooks auto-launch into the secure testing environment. If I leave this setting as is, I'll see a little folder titled Apps that I can click on from the sign-in screen and launch right into the testing environment. Now let's turn on our managed Chromebooks. You'll see that TestNav launches just by opening the device. There we go. We've configured our Chromebooks in the secure testing app. At the end of testing, I can flip the setting off in the admin console or move those devices out of the assessment OU, and they'll be ready again for classroom usage. And there you have it. Now you can easily set up your fleet of Chromebooks for state testing. To learn more about getting Chromebooks for your classroom, visit google.com/edu/Chromebooks.
All right, let me just get this back into full presentation mode. And I want to break this down a little bit for you, since I know that there were a lot of, sort of quickly went through in about 2 minutes a general overview for setting up Chromebooks for assessments, and we'll definitely pass it on to Arcadia 2 to share their best practices. But I want to call out a couple specific things. So what you saw me do in that demo was immediately go to Chrome management and then device settings. Now, if you've managed Chromebooks before, you know that there are 2 different types of settings. There are user settings and policies, which dictate what a user experiences when he or she logs into a Chromebook, and those can be any Chromebook or any Chrome browser. Now, device settings, of course, are specific to the devices themselves. And this is what you get when you pay for the $30 management license with any Chromebook that you have. This is your ability to control those specific device settings. Because the single app kiosk mode is independent of any user who's signing in to that device, it is a device setting and therefore lives in the device setting grid. So let me talk a little bit about kiosk applications. As I said, think of a kiosk as a completely separate session than any user signing into that Chromebook. So even if a student opens the lid of the Chromebook, he or she isn't signing in with his or her personal credentials, and therefore is locked into this custom testing environment. Now, our testing providers, whether it's Pearson or NWEA or Air Secure partnered for smarter balance testing, they have all configured these kiosk applications to basically be a completely secure version of that testing environment. So that when you launch into that testing app and log in with testing credentials, you're right in there. All of the external peripherals, such as microphone or video, have been turned off, and you're ready to go in a completely secure environment. Now, in the Manage Kiosk Applications section, where this arrow is pointing towards, that's where you're actually choosing the testing app that's been provided. So depending on whether your state testing uses Smarter Balanced or park assessments or something else, this is where all those applications will be used, and they're actually just pulled from the Chrome Web Store. So this is what it looks like when I actually pick a kiosk application. As you can see, there's I've searched a couple before, TestNav, Map, Chromebook app, but in this case, if I choose TestNav and add that, I'll be launched right into the testing environment as soon as that launches. Now, in the video, you heard me mention that there's 2 ways to launch this, either through an auto launch setting, where, as you saw, the Chromebook simply boot up right into that testing app, or you can select to have those testing apps not auto launch, meaning that they'll actually just sit on the side in an apps folder on the sign-in screen. You can launch into them anytime. As a best practice, I think schools, you'll sort of want to determine which devices you're allocating towards an assessment period. and if those devices are going to be used for classroom use otherwise. For example, if you have a block of 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. for testing 3 days a week, but then in the afternoon students are going to their regular classes, it may actually be really advantageous to not auto-launch into that testing environment. Because after 12 p.m. hits and testing's over for the day, students can still use those Chromebooks and log in with their credentials as if it was just a regular classroom Chromebook. However, the auto-launch capability can be very useful if you have a set block of testing time and you have a set grouping of devices that are going to be used. Basically just removes any sort of questions that you open up the lid of the Chromebook and boom, you're launched right into that testing mode. We have a great help article for using Chromebooks for student assessments. I want to share with you. It's at this short link. We'll send this out as well. goo.gl. It is case sensitive. /W S T B as in boy 3, and you'll see more information about administering single app kiosk mode. There's even some more information that's for perhaps some advanced users about setting up what's called a public session that can be used similarly to a kiosk, where you can customize settings that either whitelist or blacklist certain sites. You can use that as a testing environment if your testing provider hasn't necessarily provided a designated Chrome app. So that's a lot of information. I'm really looking forward to Arcadia and hearing from them to help us further break this down and share their best practices. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Arcadia team and let them tell you a little bit about their experience with Chromebooks and assessments.
Hi everyone, my name is Scott Bramley. I'm the Director of Technology for Arcadia Unified, and I would say that much of our experience mirrors what's been described so far in the presentation. In California, we are entering our 3rd year of electronic testing, and the first year was a pilot year. We did all of our testing on Windows workstations in a lab environment. We had a very successful pilot, but we had a very successful pilot because we put an enormous amount of work into it. We went to every single workstation. We installed the secure browser. We checked the settings. And then on top of that, we made sure that a technician and an instructional coach were in the classrooms or in the labs for all testing sessions to make sure that everything went smooth. Clearly, that was not sustainable when the pilot ended and we started testing all grade levels, and thank goodness for the Chromebooks and for the kiosk mode apps for testing. We rolled out 3,600 Chromebooks for the 2nd year of testing. All of our testing was done on Chromebooks. We did not have to send anybody out to those devices to make sure that the secure browser was installed. It was all pushed out very simply. In 5 minutes, we pushed it out to all student devices. We do not use the auto launch mode. We just push it out to all devices. An icon appears on the desktop or on the login screen where the student can run the secure browser without logging in. So our main focus at that point was to worry about infrastructure more than about the testing process and pushing out the application to each of the devices. This year, in year 3, we have about 8,000 devices for 10,000 students, so we will again not have to worry too much about the setup side of things, and we can worry more about instructional support for teachers administering the tests. So that's kind of our story and what we've done in the first 3 years of our testing.
Great. And one thing that I failed to mention that I hope you guys can touch on a bit is in terms of the organizational unit structure. In the video, I had mentioned that it's sometimes a best practice to set up an assessment OU and move devices into that assessment OU. But you guys mentioned that what you've done is just kept the app in its position on the sign-in screen in sort of the apps folder. So we'd love to hear you guys talk a little overview of your organizational unit structure and how that impacted some of your assessment choices and what that looked like in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Greg Zane. I'm the Assistant Director of Technology, and hopefully you guys won't be disappointed, but we actually have a pretty plain OU setup, we have, and when we first signed up for Google Apps for EDU, the suggestion was to have 2 separate domains. So you can see on the screen that we have our staff domain, which is AUSD.net, and our students domain, which is students.AUSD.net. Because we just published the Kiosk app around the testing time of year, we didn't break it into a separate testing OU. That would probably be ideal if you are going to do the auto launch. But because we like to really go for maximum flexibility, we did just post it as the Kiosk mode. That being said, one reason this slide is so boring for us is we really do recommend look at how you're going to use the technology and frame your organizational units around that. So again, for us, we just have students and staff broken up in separate domains and people in their appropriate school sites, but we've seen all sorts of different configurations as well.
That's great. And so, I was going to say another question on that. So you guys have your devices based on either their serial number or inventory management living in organizational units at that also contain users at a particular school, or how do you break that down? How do you position your devices within your OU structure?
So currently our devices are by school site, and that gives us the ability to distribute apps based on school sites and grade levels. We do not have them broken down into organizational units by grade level, so currently if we want to push an app out to our elementary students, it goes to all elementary students. We're looking at possibilities for making some of those changes and getting them into a few other organizational units at some point in the future, but currently they're broken down by school site, so all of the devices at a single school can be managed centrally.
Thank you for that. Before we launch into questions from the group, I have sort of the million-dollar question for you guys, is that, you've now been through this for a couple of years now. If there's one tip that you've learned now that you wish you knew at the beginning of using Chromebooks with assessments and the like, what would be that tip that you'd share with the audience on the line?
I think last year we learned a lesson. We had installed the Kiosk app the previous school year and tested it, and we never did anything else with it. We never removed it, and so we had a little issue because it doesn't automatically update. So it was important this year, when testing ended, we removed the app and we didn't push it back out until we knew that the version that was going to be used for testing was available. And the problem that created was shortly before testing, we realized that we needed to remove the app, reboot every device and log in, and then reinstall the app. And so you want to make sure that whatever your state requires for the version that you're using for that particular year is the one that you have installed.
And I would jump in and say, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Scott, one thing, at least in California, that our testing company, they say they require it, but they recommend, is that you don't allow your Chromebooks to update automatically, which we do struggle with because there's so many great features coming out. So you may want to check with your testing administrator on that, but ours does recommend that once they bring out a certain version of the testing platform that you pause your Chromebooks from updating automatically until testing is done. Which a great feature of the management console is the ability to tell it what the highest version you want your devices to update to is, so you can specify that. So that's been very helpful.
That's a great best practice, guys. That's super helpful. And also, just as a best practice from Google, you have the ability to, within the admin console, keep a subsection of your devices, maybe 10 or 15%, on the latest beta channel, so you can see as new updates to the Chrome operating system and Chrome browser are coming out. If anything happens to break, you can preempt that, or you can raise the issue to us so that we can make sure that we're on top of that for future versions. But definitely, as far as high-stakes testing is concerned, you're right. It's high stakes. It's sort of all or nothing. So that's a great best practice to maybe even keep the devices on a version or two behind, just to make sure that you're going to get 100% functionality on that exact testing day. So thank you guys for that.
Yep.
We have some really great questions rolling in from the audience. So we're going to transition a little bit and invite you to ask some questions. We have a bunch, so we'll choose selectively in about for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so and try to get to as many questions as we can. Arcadia guys, I think I'm going to be directing a lot of these to you. So the first one is, is one from one of our attendees, and he's asking actually for best practices in terms of a one-to-one environment where the classroom grouping changes. What's the best solution for testing, in particular math testing? So if you have students who have a device with them all day, every day, but they're changing classrooms, do you think it would be a best practice to deploy certain testing apps to their apps folder, or is it better to try to manage that from the admin side and push out a specific app at one specific time?
From our standpoint, I think what we've done, because we haven't had an overwhelming number of devices that we need to run, or I'm sorry, apps that we need to run in kiosk mode, when we need an app available, we push it out to all devices, either in our entire organization or all of the devices at an individual school site if the school site needs access to that. Our model was a 3-year rollout going one-to-one. We're in year 2. Next year we will be one-to-one, but our first 2 years we have implemented by putting classroom sets in carts in classrooms, and so we kind of face that too. But our practice has been to push out the apps to an entire school site or the entire organization as needed, and we haven't had an enormous number of those, so we're not overwhelming anybody with the number of apps showing up at the bottom of their screen.
That's great information. There's actually a question here that I think is a really interesting one. Of course, for high-stakes testing, a lot of this is done on devices and is moving towards the web. But for classroom teachers who are interested in running assessments, whether it be an end-of-unit quiz or a test, a final test, running those online, have you guys ever played around with creating a kiosk or sort of a locked-down testing environment for a test or an assessment that a classroom teacher or a department is running? And if so, what's been your experience? Or if not, how would you maybe approach that, knowing sort of the ins and outs of the admin console?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually did put together a custom app for one of our online assessment systems. We were able to get the template and modify it, and it worked pretty well. I think we're still hoping to see and playing around with a few ideas for what some kind of centralized or standardized way would be to do that, but we have had some luck in creating a custom app to do that.
Great. Yeah, the best practices that I've heard along those lines, just to share my thoughts, is either using, and again, this is going to take some collaboration between the individual teacher and the IT department, since pushing these kiosk apps out is typically a function of IT. But there's a couple ways that you could think about doing it. One is using the public sessions kiosk app, where you can actually completely customize all of the Chrome user settings for a particular session. For example, you can turn off the peripherals like audio. You can turn off Google Translate, for example, if it's a foreign language assessment. You can blacklist the internet and whitelist a particular testing site if you want to just use that site, so students can't go elsewhere. So you do have a lot of flexibility. It takes a bit of creativity to put that together, but that's one way, is using a public session kiosk mode as well. The other interesting way to problem solve around that could be if you have a developer, if you have someone at your district who has a bit of time to investigate building a Chrome app. It's actually a pretty easy process to build a Chrome app and distribute that through the admin console. There's some free tools out there. If you do a quick search for build Chrome app or Chrome sign builder even, you can actually see ways to create just a regular website, as if you own that website, into a packaged Chrome app that could be pushed out for a custom testing situation. So those are just a couple of thoughts. Let's go ahead and pop in for some other questions here. So actually a really good question coming into us, and this, our attendee says this may be going a bit beyond the scope of the discussion, But Arcadia, did you guys run into any type of wireless issues in terms of infrastructure that needed attention to make your testing go smoothly?
You know, we didn't, but we were slightly obsessive about preparing for wireless. I'll start by saying our Chromebooks have worked so well. We've shifted a lot of attention to making sure our infrastructure, both wireless and wired network, is ready to handle the sheer number of devices we're going to have on them. So that being said, we did make sure anywhere we were testing that we did have proper wireless coverage. We had our network analysts go out and actually make sure the radios were overlapping in the right way and put a little bit of attention there ahead of time. But that being said, there was no specific issue with the Chromebooks. It was more just preparing our wireless to be able to handle that sheer number of devices.
Great, thank you. Two more quick questions that are probably quick hits here, and we've touched a little bit on them, but it may be useful to go over them again. Explain to us, I know we've had this beautiful OU slide up for the last 5 minutes or so. Tell us a little bit more about how you guys have your Chromebooks within those user OUs and how you manage that, how you sort of manage the inventory and knowing where everything is.
Yeah, sure. You'll notice that we do have some of our organizational units that have additional sub-organizations beneath them, and so we do have some places where we have put devices into other organizational units, particularly for printing purposes. For example, for our library at the high school, all of the devices we use device settings for the printers, whereas we essentially have most of our teachers managing the printing in our classrooms. So we've used it for that. In terms of inventory, because we have classroom sets right now, we've kind of turned that more into a classroom management issue than actually using the management console to do that. Next year when we go one-to-one, that will be much more simplified in that each student will be issued a device. We're fortunate. We don't have a lot of loss, so that hasn't been a major concern for us. So we're still exploring different ways to set up our organizational units more effectively for us. But all in all, it's worked quite smoothly. I would say that printing was a little bit of a challenge, but we seem to have overcome that at this point, and that seems to be going pretty well as well.
Great, guys. Thank you for that insight. I see a question that I can take. The question is, the state of Texas has changed from using TestNav and Pearson for state testing, for STAR at least. Is there support for other testing assessments? Good news for the state of Texas. ETS, the new testing provider that won the state contract maybe 5 or 6 months ago, will be providing a Chrome app. It is yet to be released to the Chrome web store, so be on the lookout for that or get in contact, put an inquiry into ETS. ETS has successfully worked with other states that have deployed testing via Chrome, so we're excited to see that come to Texas as well. So we're just about at time. We've been on for about 35 minutes. There are a couple other questions that we'll go ahead and answer offline for the particular individuals that ask those questions. So I want to give a big thanks to our gentlemen at Arcadia for opening up their organizational units and their settings and really sharing their wisdom with us as they've launched into Chromebooks and state assessments over the last couple of years. So thank you to Arcadia. Thank you to everyone who's joined today. And again, if you have any questions, there's some great resources in that state testing assessment guide. And again, feel free to reach out to our Google team at any time. We're here to help. And thanks again, everyone, for joining.